Hey people, Architect here. You can't replay Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain right after you finished it, because by the end of your playthrough you become such a buffed alpha chad from all the upgrades you paid dear money and materials for that you can't just go back from that right away to being the famous right out of the hospital one-handed, one-eyed big boss. You have to give yourself some time to forget about the game and how you used to play it. How much time, you ask me? Well, let's talk about replayability first. Let's ask a question first. What makes a game replayable? Is it New Game Plus? Back in my days, we didn't have New Game Plus. Is it multiple endings and branching storylines? Well, that depends on how many of these are actually good enough for you to go through the entire game again. It depends on how much fun the game is 80% of the time. I've replayed the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy almost 7 times and that 2008 reboot about 4 times, and I'll still go back and play all of them because these games were just so much fun.
Why the need for so much gruesome graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
Well, is there a game that is replayable and isn't a ton of fun? Yeah, well, that's where the other 20% come in. See, back in the day, we didn't have the astronomical amount of games that we have today. I'm talking from 1990 to 2010 as a general example. Games weren't as many, and the internet up until about 2004 or so didn't have that many soft copies of games, so the only way you could get your hands on a game is you have to go to a game shop, have to have the platform for it, and then you stick with the game that you bought until you've turned it inside out. Then you had to wait until your parents thought you were worthy enough for a new treat for your well-behaved manners and good deeds. At least that's in case if you weren't a spoiled little
Baba
shit.
Booey.
So you'd be stuck with only a couple of games for a few weeks or so. Now, at the time, if a game wasn't fun enough, why would you replay it aside from not having any other game available? Well, the answer would be secrets, unlockables, difficulties, and branching missions. So, if we talk about a game like Warcraft, for example, timeless RTS classic, right? That game was excruciating to go through because it was very difficult. Most games were difficult back in the day, but in order to succeed, the game gives you in each mission a side quest here or a secret item there, so that you can build your heroes well enough to withstand the difficult battles you go through. It also had a hard mode, but what kind of psychopath plays Warcraft 3 on hard mode? That's not a very fun game, but it is replayable. But let's switch that up a little and look at a game like Max Payne. That game is probably the best third-person shooter I've ever played. Definitely has the best bullet time mechanic ever made. I wouldn't call it replayable for any other reason besides being fun, but the developers did put in different difficulties that you unlock when you finish a playthrough, so to 100% this game, you have to play it about 4 times or so. Let's answer a little question though. What is a non-replayable game? I'd call that the entire Assassin's Creed series. Now, I did play some of these games more than a few times, but there isn't something inherently different about each game when you replay it. Not even difficulty modes. Now, let me tell you something, kids. Assassin's Creed wasn't the boring, botched monstrosity that it is today, mind you. The first 5 games had very interesting, compelling, and suspenseful storylines and characters with very innovating game design choices, whether they're combat or otherwise, but they were never replayable. Yes, some of the previously mentioned replayability reasons may apply to some things in Assassin's Creed, but really, when was the last time you thought, hey, I want to replay Assassin's Creed 1? Except for JV, God bless his soul. I myself have replayed the first 5 games in this series, not counting 3 because Radunagedon.
My name is Rado Hangado.
Well, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that.
The reason I replayed 1, 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations is because of the nostalgia and the fact that these games actually had very compelling stories, characters, thematic tones, and I still get the same chills when I see the insane reveals at the end of each game. Black Flag isn't an Assassin's Creed game in my opinion. It's a pirates game, and it's a ton of fun because of how simple, smooth, and enjoyable the ship fights are, but I don't think it has the same replayability aspects that the aforementioned games had, but it kept pulling me back because of the best thing about it, obviously, which is the sailing and ship battle mechanics. That game made you feel like an insane pirate out to get every ship that has ever sailed the Caribbean. And in my opinion, that's one of the best pirate games ever made. It's not a pirate simulation like, let's say, Sea of Thieves, and it's of course not going to be as detailed as something like Skull and Bone when it gets released, but it's definitely better than most of the games that have been released so far. Well, someone's gonna ask me, what about the stealth mechanics in Assassin's Creed? Well, that's when we get to the list of the greatest games of all time, folks. For most of the series, stealth wasn't really a requirement, and the game mechanics encouraged berserker-style combat most of the time, especially since they added the chain kills in Brotherhood, so I only know one person who'd actually stealth his way around those missions. So, going back to MGS5, the best stealth game of all time, sue me. I give it this title because of how it doesn't encourage any playstyle, although it's a stealth series. It gives you dozens of options to engage a situation, and each situation is different. It will either have different enemy types, objectives, platforming sections, vehicles, static weapons, prisoners, hiding spots. I could go on forever, but the greatest thing about this game is definitely the difficulty. There are only a few games I've played that have an adapting difficulty system. It strips away from you the choice of adjusting the difficulty, but in turn the game's objectives designs will adjust accordingly to how well you do and what equipment you're using. For example, it will put armored soldiers if you're using a lot of low penetration weapons. If you're using stealth too much, they will put more patrols and searchlights. If you're using a lot of smoke grenades, it will give soldiers gas masks. And that's why this game is so replayable. Each playthrough you'll prioritize upgrading different items, and you'll end up picking certain items over others, so when you use them, the game will come back at you with a different counter, which will have you change your playstyle to something different. You'll end up mixing up all your equipment and your playstyles to succeed. So, if you're not a hardcore stealth fan, the game lets you choose equipment that enhance fighting skills rather than stealth skills, and vice versa. I myself enjoyed the stealth in MGS5 more than any other hardcore stealth game, and I'm not even a fan of this series. That's because I like to be given options, and realistically speaking, a group of soldiers going behind enemy lines don't just get a failure screen when they get detected. That doesn't mean I don't like stealth games though, so comes in second place is the original Dishonored. That's another game that has a lot of inherent replayability mechanics and is a ton of fun. This game gives you a lot of tools and ways to infiltrate and assassinate, from magic to crossbows to pistols. It gives you a sword and tops it all off with a progression system that includes health and mana upgrades. It has secrets and skill points, and the best of all, it has open-ended infiltrations. So it makes sure to give you a lot of options as well to engage a situation, although it's a bit more hardcore than MGS5 because of the fact that it doesn't hold your hand through the game, and once you get detected, everyone will attack you and it will be very difficult to get out of the situation. Third game in line is the Hitman series. Now, most people know the recent remake trilogy, but the first Hitman game was a huge deal. It was one of the few games at the time that had open-ended missions, giving you equipment options to accompany your infiltration plan, but they did a really good job with the remake to replicate this. I'd say the Thief series had a lot of impact on this genre. They were very early stealth games, but had very innovative mechanics for interacting with the world, like water arrows to turn light sources off as you sneak by. All of these games have a lot of replayability, whether it's the ways you go at objectives, progression styles, secret objectives, or even just wanting to get that really cool SSS rating. I'd have to give a few honorable mentions to great stealth missions like All Gillied Up from Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the original, and a lot of stealth missions from the Call of Duty series in general. I think those missions were absolutely fantastic, and even if it was mostly linear and scripted, it did a very great job of setting the tone and immersing you in that stealth mode. The Crysis series, especially the first Crysis game, had a very good design for open world engagements, and it gives you one of the most unique abilities ever made for stealth, which is the nanosuit. It's basically a suit that makes you invincible and makes you literally invisible. The Far Cry series had a pretty solid stealth level designs with their outpost clearing objectives that are similar to Metal Gear Solid's open world design. It gives you multiple options to engage in whichever way you think is more comfortable, including using animals to your advantage. Another honorable mention I'd like to give to the forgotten game I've played a long time ago called Mark of the Ninja, which is a side-scroller 2D stealth platformer with a very unique hiding and assassination mechanics. It plays well on the fact that it's a 2D side-scroller, and it focuses on platforming sections and how to use them to your advantage as a part of the environment. I think a great way to design a stealth game is to first make sure that the player doesn't have any overpowered abilities that would overshadow the stealth abilities, but also make sure that if they get detected, they'd have a backup plan, instead of just getting a loading screen that resets them from the beginning. I'm sure many players have always gone with the Berserker style over stealth because, well, if you have the option to go big kaboom, why would you go for sneaking around for an hour just to finish one objective? If a game does that, it also gives the player many ways to enjoy the same game, and it will inherently make the player think, well, hey, maybe I should actually replay this game with stealth in mind. As for hardcore stealth games, they have their audience and it is big, but it's truly a rare sight when you find a game that has everyone agreeing on, and that's what I look for. That's why Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain is my greatest of all time stealth game. I am waiting for another game that would get that title, but until then, thanks for all the members of the Assassin's Creed Guild for funding and bankrolling these videos. You are all truly wonderful. Stay tuned, like, share, comment, subscribe, and support. Most importantly, give me money and have a good one.